Can I go ahead, Mr. Yemi?
You just hold on a little bit. You need to introduce you first for such session.
Okay.
I'm trying to initiate the recording.
Recording in progress.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's edition of HR Mentorship Learning Series. Tonight, we'll be looking at a topic, building a culture of innovation and agility, HR's role in driving organizational change. My name is Oluyemi Adeosun, and our facilitator for tonight. We are very privileged to have with us Mr. Aderemi Pakumoju. He is an executive human resource and business transformation strategist. He is the director at Atesia Traffic Solutions and managing partner Outdepth Consulting. He is a result-driven professional with over 14 years of diverse experience spanning strategic human resource, operational leadership, technological and is a certified senior professional in human resource and executive coach. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited to present to us Aderemi Pakumoju as he engages with us on the topic, building a culture of innovation and agility, HR's role in driving organizational change.
Okay, Mr. Yemi, thank you so very much for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for joining the call tonight. Thank you to you, Mr. Yemi, in particular. Amazing work that is being done with HR mentorship, a massive community of seasoned HR professionals. So it's a privilege for me to be here to share my thoughts. We would, ride this road together as we usually would do with these sessions on HR mentorship over the next, I think, 1 hour, one and a half hours, and we see where that takes us. So it's an opportunity and a privilege for me to be here. And so we will just dive right in. Thank you for the introduction as well. My name is Remy. I would just say that I enjoy engaging with people. I enjoy building systems that deliver productivity for organizations as well. So to kick things off, now, if you are on this call and you're not from, the West African part of Africa, part of the world, you probably won't recognize this bowl, but I'm sure that most of the people here do recognize that this is a fresh bowl of vegetable soup, right? And I'd like to ask us one question, okay? Apart from, I hope you have had something to eat sometime in the last few hours, because this might feel a bit too tantalizing. But if you haven't, please bear with me. So if you were asked which kitchen is the best poised kitchen to make this meal, so would you say is the local kitchen where you will use firewood to make this, or is just your average kitchen where you have a few high-tech equipment and then you just have the normal pots, coal, this and all that put together, or you require an ultra modern kitchen to sort of produce something that will be this good, appealing to the eye, appealing to the taste. What do we think? I'd like to hear our thoughts in the chat box. Where do we think is the best placed kitchen? What type of kitchen do we think is the best placed kitchen to make this? Or do we even think the kitchen is the most important factor to produce this quality meal? What do we think? So I'll give a few seconds so that I don't take too much of our time to just hear our responses. Can you all hear me, by the way, just to be sure that I'm audible?
Yes, we can hear you from my hand.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so what do we think? Local kitchen, the smoke will make it bang. Okay, thank you for that. Okay. Any other opinion? So let me ask, Rob, the kitchen has nothing to do with it. We're making this meal. The ingredients are what are important. Okay. I think skills and expertise is more important than the kitchen. Firewood mood tastes different. Okay. Any kitchen, the chef is the cocoa. Okay. So fantastic thoughts there, right? There are a number of factors that will help you make such an amazing meal like this, right? Obviously, you've got to have very good ingredients, you've got to have the presence of mind to even want to put this together. But I think that the most important person or the most important factor here is the person making the meal. So you would always be able to make this meal if you are put in a local kitchen, or you are put in a normal kitchen, or put in an ultra modern kitchen. The difference is you're just adapting, right? And I'd like us to please bear that in mind as we go through this session. Your goal is to not take everything here and just dump it straight into your own organization, or to evaluate your organization directly from everything that we discussed. You've got to do a bit of adaptation for it to make sense, right? Because in that organization where you are able to drive organizational change. What's key is the level of maturity that your organization, or the level of organizational maturity that your organization falls to, right? So when we move forward, let's look at, this story here where we've got Wilson, right? A middle-aged Nigerian who's owned a phone since 2008. And I'm going to take us through a journey here, right? I'd like us to remember, if you had a phone in 2008, right? The likelihood is that if you were recharging your phone, you would probably use this type of recharge cards. Now, if you remember that this type of recharge cards existed then, you would also know that after a few years, or maybe you want to use months now, if we stack them all up, these cards metamorphosed into those slightly thinner papers, right? So you just have papers that people will just put, okay, for MTN, and then for Airtel. And apologies if you again belong to any other telco apart from the one I'm showing. This is just for illustrative purposes alone, right? So you've got recharge cards, and this is how you would have recharged your phone, right? Now, let me ask us as HR professionals, at the point here where we were recharging our phones here, as a HR professional working with any telco, just quickly give me one or two examples of the people that you would have needed to make this happen. What talent, what groups of people would you have needed to make sure that these were produced and delivered to the people that also needed to sell it to the end user? So I'm looking out for our opinions. What do we think? What groups of talent would have had to be available within the organization for us to be able to deliver recharge cards to people across the nation in various places, to make sure that they're able to, knowing that our primary source of revenue is continuous recurring recharge, or recurring revenue, which obviously would come from recharging our phones, right? So what do we think? So whilst I'm waiting for the comments to come in, I'm going to share the next level where this metamorphosed into, and then we can start to see or start to ask ourselves then that the requirement for talent to deliver on the two stages, are they the same or are they different? Okay, so after a while, right, where we've always had people recharging with recharge cards and then moved to recharge papers, we transitioned into VTU, right? Where you could easily just recharge your phones, right, without the presence of paper, pretty much, okay? Now, you moved again to the point where you could recharge via your phones, right? Whether you were using USSD or you were using the bank apps. Now, I'd like to ask again, let me see if we've got a few comments on the chat box. What do we think changed between this point where we have recharge cards and the point where the banks were able to recharge from our phones and leveraging our banks? Because as HR professionals, when we're conscious of how organizations evolve, we're better prepared to drive change. If we're able to see how things have changed around us in the past, and to also check what the rate and speed of change is now, then we are ready to adapt as professionals. Okay, so I'll just check one more time. If I don't find, then we'll just move on. Okay, so I see innovation and technology. Yes, very, very critical. Now, there are things that are directly impacted by the transition from using recharge cards to our banks and our phones, right? And those three things are one, people, processes, and then technology. So let's think about it this way. At the point where you are recharging with this paper, right, you would have had someone or a group of people create the codes, and then you would have contracted to the person who would manufacture the cards, right? All of this would have been printed out. And then, of course, you have your internal supply chain department ensuring that they are working with, again, all those territory dealers, right? Dealers that you have across territories so that you can supply to them. And then you have those guys within your business that are not members of your supply chain team, but they are members of your sales team or channel sales team that would have had to go and work with the territory dealers to make sure that you're able to drive sales at that point to make sure that the product gets to the end user. Now, by the time you arrive at where you are recharging via your phone, the supply chain department that you require to deliver on the paper and the recharge cards would have shrunk to the point where, not that it has completely disappeared, absolutely not. It just would have shrunk to the point where you are now catering for internal supply chain issues or other things that has to do with supply chain, for example. And so you now have new staff available now. Okay, so who are the people that can help us to deliver the technology to be able to, generate these recharge cards automatically on demand? Because now it's not like you have gotten to a store where you just find a stack of recharge cards. No, it's as you recharge on your phone that you get the credit on your device. Now you're not even imputing any code. You're not dialing anything. And so all of this, right, happened over a period of years. Now, there were things that necessitated the change here that you see. And we will go through them, in this session, because there are some things that directly affect how organizations change, right, globally. Whether you're in Africa or you're in Nigeria or you are in Europe or you are in Asia, there are some fundamental things that impact how the organization changes, right? So you can talk about microeconomic forces, for example. So rising inflation and global rates globally. So we've seen it in recent times, right? In Nigeria, for example, there's been aggressive costing capital expenditure reduction because when you think about how the Naira has devalued, of course, when the new government, the easy government came on board, we've had, the value of the Naira against the dollar really jump up, right? And that's affected how some organizations have had to work. From one of the first, announcements you probably would have heard in your own organization is maybe cost reduction on certain things that you would normally just take for granted, right? So you have those significant macroeconomic forces that affects everyone, right? And then you've got technology disruption. Now, we will talk more on this, but again, you have rapid advancements in generative AI. And within Nigeria, you've got the rise in mobile money and fintech solutions. So if you think about Opay, for example, right? Opay has made other bank apps that are actually on technology platforms technically obsolete, right? So if your bank or if your organization or financial institution or services company isn't regularly innovating, it almost feels like you are, left out, even though you have an app that is available to be downloaded on App Store, on Android, Google Play. People are just moving on. Why? Because they'll tell you, okay, if I log on to Opay or MoneyPoint or PalmPay or any of these other, rapidly, innovative apps, I'm able to get a lot more done, and I don't have to. They are thinking about me, right? So you have things like that happening in Nigeria because not all change is being driven by AI. There's still some technology changes that are still happening and are still impacting organizations. What is critical, though, is to note that amongst the changes that have affected how we live, work, and do, or even just exist, AI will be just as big as the internet or the industrialization, period as well. So very, very critical, right? And then you have geopolitical events and crisis. Okay, so you can think of the conflicts at the time between Russia and Ukraine. You can think of the one that is even more, how would I put it now, recent, right? Israel and Iran. You think of the tariff negotiation between US and a couple of countries, again, or nations, especially with China. And I don't know if many of you do, revel in using social media. You would have probably found on TikTok where a manufacturer in China that you would not have had access to is suddenly doing a live video telling you how you can get a luxury bag for next to nothing compared to how much you're buying. All of those things are things that just geopolitical events impact and changes how organizations function, right? So very, very critical. And then you have, social cultural shifts, right? And for this, you think that the way we've grown, especially within the West African Nigerian context, if you, for example, wanted to, if you're hungry, you would literally get to a restaurant and you buy stuff. There's some things that are mentally you would not think about before, that someone will sit within the comfort of their homes and then would order a meal, and the meal will just come and meet you wherever you are. And so now you're beginning to find a lot more that growing populace of young people who want the service across restaurants, for example, who are leveraging Glovo, Chowdeck. I'm sure there are many people on this call that are, prime members of Glovo, for example, and you are able to enjoy the service these guys are providing without physically getting to them. Now, imagine that you are a restaurant right next to another restaurant and you don't really see people walk into that restaurant. It's no longer a performance measurement or a measure to say whether that restaurant is doing well or not. All you just probably need these days is to just check the number of bikes outside the restaurant, right? How many bikes are arriving at that restaurant? Don't even think about the people, especially if you're within Lagos or environs, right? Why? Because all of this is being driven by technology. All right. So that level of social cultural shifts across the world that keeps impacting how organizations change. Now, you've got the competitive landscape and market dynamics, for example. And we're talking about global area. But another one that comes to mind is Temu. When Temu came, flooded the market with heavy digital marketing, and many people didn't even realize that they're not essentially a Nigerian company, right? And you are on Instagram, you're selling, for example, clothes, you have your audience in Nigeria, and you're suddenly competing with someone or an organization that doesn't even exist here, but has very strong digital footprint, which then means that you also have to grow your digital footprint. You also have to innovate. You have to find ways to get your pricing right so that you're able to compete effectively, right? So these type of factors do not excuse any organization pretty much. The reason why we call them fundamental and existential factors is because when they happen, they affect everyone. You adjust. Once they are within your space, you adjust. So for example, the example I gave about Glovo, you see organizations within that space adjusting to see how they can continue to compete and to survive, and of course make the margins that they require and they need to deliver to their shareholders, right? I think you also have to now think about the value chain here. So, for example, when you look at Glovo, the leverage is beginning to give other organizations, right, or even other SMEs that will not have seen the light of day. You guys have probably read the Amoke example, for example, Amoke, the Amala seller, right? How much billions that they've written since the launch of Glovo. Okay, so apart from fundamental and existential factors, you do have strategic and performance-driven factors, okay, that also drive changes within organizations. Now, you classify their own changes as significant because, yes, they are major, but they're not as major as those fundamental factors that we have talked about. So, say, for example, when an organization has new leadership, right? You hire a new CEO and the person comes with renewed, passion and vigor and, strategy, the roadmap they want, or he or she wants the organization to go through, having engaged with the shareholders, right? And that affects how everybody within the organization starts to behave, right? Because they may say, okay, you know what? We're now heading in this direction. That direction that we're going before is now becoming obsolete, or this is our new market direction, okay? And then you've got mergers and acquisitions, for example. So every time merger and acquisitions happen, what do you see? So culture merges. You see acquisition of teams where teams are expanded, some teams get shrunk down, expansion of operations within certain spaces, closing down of some branches, just to align with the new strategy. Of course, letting go of certain people. All of those things impact how the organization works, causes changes and all of that. And you think again about things like market expansion, innovation, and new product and service development. Now, as HR, one of the things that we've always talked about is, a seat at the table, being able to speak the business lingua franca, being able to, contribute at that strategic level. But the bulk of those conversations happen in and around some of the things we're already talking about, right? Because when you look at the drivers of, organizational changes, before you start to get to things like internal performance issues, you would have had to first of all touch on fundamental factors, like macroeconomic factors like technology distribution, like we said. You would have had to talk about things that are strategic, imperatives for the organization before you start to think about, for example, internal performance issues, right? So again, when you look at some of the examples, the decline profitability of market share. So if you look at the stories that we've heard, organizations who used to produce films, right? For our cameras, and then they go digital on time. Leaders within, the mobile phone space like Nokia and all of that didn't adapt on time. One of the telcos that is quite close to me, like very dear to me, one of the fastest, sort of fastest growing telco at the time, that has today become, to a certain level, almost non-existent, because their subscriber base is so low, and all of that because of operational inefficiencies, low employee morale and engagement, sometimes resource allocation and misallocation. All of these things are things that impact how organizations change, right? And so you would ask yourself then that, why are we having this conversation? Why now? Why is it important now to remember that HR needs to be at the forefront of driving organizational change? The reason is because when you think about Wilson that I shared earlier, Wilson, he had a phone in 2008, and the changes that he experienced from recharging his phone using a recharge card to recharging his phone via the bank, right, or USSD, all of that happened over a number of years. Whether you say it's 4 years to 10 years, it took a number of years, right? But the rate of change now is ridiculous. Because when you think about how organizations are functioning now, whatever level you are, however matured your organization is, and please, let's establish some facts here. These changes will not impact all organizations at the same rate. If your organization is a global multi-market organization, you are probably neck deep experiencing these changes at a higher level to maybe an SME, right? But it doesn't still mean that the SME is totally, protected from all these changes that we're talking about. I remember once when we were having a conversation about Formula One cars, right? And someone said that if you see a Formula One car less than 50 meters from you, it's certain that it will hit you before you get off the track. That the fact that it can be 50 meters from you, it will hit you before you get off the track. And that's the level of change that we're experiencing now. All over the news, you're hearing of large organizations that are replacing departments. At first they started off as though they were replacing HR departments. Some were talking about replacing, other departments. It doesn't really matter the departments. What matters is that they are replacing people with systems, AI systems, right? And it has started. It doesn't mean that it's now going to just from there skyrocket. No, absolutely not, because some of it will fail, some of it will be rolled back. But what's critical is that while all of that is happening, as HR professionals, how are we ourselves making sure that we're able to add value through that process, add value to organizations that remain relevant, but add value so that as professionals we're relevant, whether we're within our own organization or we are moving, right? And so the change, the pace of change right now is unrelenting, right? And the impact on businesses is very significant. One of the most significant changes that I've seen, and I gave this example some weeks ago, is that if you have within your organization someone who uses Excel very, very well, they are probably like demigods, because for you to be able to stack up the number of formulas and know all those different tricks, to be able to use Excel for analysis, to build dashboards and all of that, right? And then here Google comes with, through their Gemini, offered through Google Workspace, just putting an AI function that now allows you to give instructions to AI to carry out the same thing you would have spent years, trying to learn. Now, it's at the beginning of the implementation. It's already being used, but it's only going to get better. And so that skill is going to be democratized very, very quickly. So for us as HR then, how are we, bracing up for that change? Because for us to do that, we need to know our organizations well. Irrespective of our organizations, we need to know where we are, right? So that we're able to add value, because the benefit of us being able to add value at this level, is a lot, right? Of course, you have enhanced competitive and market leadership. You've got greater organizational resilience, because now you have people within your own organizations that are better prepared to manage change, better prepared to be able to, be productive, be innovative, and more importantly, they are agile, they are able to adapt, right? You have improved customer satisfaction because as you are adapting, you are taking note of what's happening within the market, and you are bringing that vis-a-vis what you're able to do within your organization at the level of your own organizational maturity. You're bringing that together, fusing them together to provide offerings, whether to your external or your internal customers. Your employees are better engaged because they feel that, okay, whilst I'm here, it's not like I'm working with an organization that at some point is just going to be wiped away by some technology announcement. At this rate, announcements, whether within AI or within technology, almost come on a daily basis, right? And you could just be a victim of any of it anytime soon, okay? So what are the twin engines for future success for us? One is innovation. So beyond the product, how do we innovate around our processes? How do we innovate around our business models? How do we innovate around the expertise we give people? How do we innovate around our services, right? Because if we don't have that curious mindset to be able to say, what is it I can do better now? What is it I can do better in 3 months, in 1 month, and in 6 months? Now, I stop at 6 months because it's almost now difficult to begin to plan for organizations 2 years ahead or 3 years ahead. Before you arrive there, people have met up with you and they have passed by you. Okay, so you've got to be that agile enough that you have broken down your vision in a way that you're engaging, or you're getting the organization to engage employees to share what the vision is as regularly as possible. Being able to take feedback, right? So innovation is one thing, and the other is agility. How quickly can we change? How quickly can we respond? How quickly can we learn? How quickly are we able to adapt, to what's happening around us? How do you provide service today that you can adapt very quickly to say, okay, you know what, I can start to do this in a different way. We can start to provide. How quickly are you even able to power your people within your own organizations to also deliver output to you? Because you also have ways by which you would normally receive output for work that they have been assigned to do, right? So how can you work with line managers to help their own people? Okay, because that's very, very critical for us as HR to move from being policy driven and reactive and administrative, to being strategic and being proactive and being the one who's the custodian and the anchor of, the right culture. That at that point helps us to begin to add value to our own organization. So I want to take a pause here because I just want to be sure that we can all hear me. So if anybody can just maybe speak up if you can hear me, please, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Yeah. If you can hear me, just signify I can hear you. Anyone at all, just to be sure that I'm not alone on the score.
All right. I can hear you from my hand.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Folari. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chukwemeka. Thank you, Priska. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Rab. I can hear you. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Stephen. Now, fantastic. So we can move on at this point, right? Okay, so for us to be able to drive organizational change within our different companies, right? There are questions that we need to ask because these questions help us as HR, as part of the leadership, to begin to direct or contribute or join or enable our leaders and employees to begin to think in the right way. And it's important for us to also even have answers or at least direction to some of these questions. So number one, do we have a clearly defined and communicated vision within our organization? Again, let's be careful here. The idea is not to have a 4-year, 5-year plan. You can have that. You can have that as a vision, but then you have to have that broken down to the point where it's easy to adapt within that long-term strategy. Because some people really believe in that, having 10 years, 5 years, and all of that used to work. I mean, I heard recently at the session that organizations used to take 70 years to make a change. I'm surprised. I'm sure that would have been really amazing just to do something in a certain way for 70 years. But that was a long time ago, right? I'm sure that has dialed down to 20 years and then to 5 years and then to what we have now, which is much more, less than a year. So if you really think about it, right, you can have your long-term strategy, or maybe you want to call it your vision, but it has to be broken down in a way that you are able to compete and you're able to at least provide milestones within that vision that your people can run with, that still keeps you in line and make sure that you are competitive. Okay? Do we have leaders that understand the business? Now, there's this conversation, right, about leadership within businesses. That's one of the most talked about topics. If you search leadership on Google, you would see millions of responses, right? If you dial it down to corporate leadership, you will see even a lot more. But it doesn't really translate as much. Now, if you check within your environment and within your organization, be true to you. Where are your leaders at? Because in some organizations, some leaders don't even understand the organizational strategy. They do understand what they're doing in their department, but they don't understand the organizational strategy. And so do you have leaders at all levels, which means at that strategic level, at the operational level, that can deliver on your organizational goals, right? Is there a roadmap for digital transformation within your organization, your organization's ecosystem? That's now a must. You're not going to escape this digital transformation. Whether you're going to only adopt it up to maybe 10%, 20%, 50%, it's going to get to everyone, right? Have you identified and planned for potential risks associated or impacting your organization, right? E.g., AI. So you have sectors, industry sectors gradually being wiped out just by the introduction of AI. Okay, so as an organization, how are you better positioned? If you think about it, you had ERPs, right? ERPs have been around for a while. ERPs are enterprise resource planning softwares. They've been around for years. With continuous innovation, organizations would take up different ERPs, whether to manage a certain department or to manage the entire organization, right? Typically, most ERPs will have the foundational finance module, and then you can then add on different modules. You manage HR, supply chain, procurement or production, manufacturing, different aspects of different modules, right? But when you think about that, and you layer onto that actually more than 60% of large ERP deployments don't succeed. But then you add just that little extra layer where you have AI and people who now are creating AI or AI agents, right? And gradually people are able to develop little platforms here and there that can cater for, processes, automating certain processes within their organizations. Even if it's for SMEs, what does that tell you? That's an existential threat to ERPs as a whole, because at some point, whilst ERPs, yes, will still be around for some years, if I'm able to build what I want, then I don't need to buy something that I need to customize and keep customizing. Again, I'm saying this now to say, whilst it's not ready yet today, in many respects, within a few months, we're already there, right? People and culture. What are the current skills and competencies within our organization? What will be the future skill requirements? And what are the most significant gaps? Now, I want to say this here. At the base of the job design, right? When you say that you are doing your job design, within an organization, you have that very common word called competencies, right? So you stack up competencies, you have a skill. Now, today, we need to ask ourselves, the people that we hire, the ones that work within our organization, the competencies to deliver today and tomorrow. As HR leaders, do we have the competency to design, evaluate, measure, and adapt competencies as well? Because you can take something and say, oh, these are the competencies required for this job, you recruit the person, and sometimes that's the last time you'll be able to talk about competencies until maybe a performance issue comes up. Or maybe it's time for the strategic reporting, you want to report on things that you have done, and you put all those nice buzzwords within HR and just to put everything together. Competencies have been around for a while and they would remain. They are only just going to adapt. So what are the competencies that we need for the future? One of which we will talk about later, but I just mentioned now. You know how you talk about communication as a competence? Most people think about it as, okay, well, the ability to read, write within organizations, to be able to communicate professionally, right? Via emails and all of that. The truth is this: if you really measure how people communicate effectively within your organization, if your score after the measurement is high, you would almost be comfortable that it will be easier for people to adapt to using platforms like AI platforms, because from generative AI to agentic AI, communication is at the base. It's of course being called prompt engineering today, or prompting. If you start at prompting, I don't take it to engineering. It's called prompting today, but it's basically being able to communicate effectively with a large language model on a platform, maybe ChatGPT, Gemini, DeepSeek, or whichever one that you so wish to choose. So Competencies are really, really key within your organization today. What are the competencies required to deliver on what you need to deliver on over the next few months, years, and what are the gaps today? What will be your talent acquisition strategy in the future? Because one, the talent pool is, of course, global already, right? But then there will be people who can begin to do things on their own and don't want to come into the workplace. There are those that would continuously want to come into the workplace because it's a viable way of earning a living, and there's nothing absolutely wrong with that. But the way they would want to be recruited today, if you're interviewing, you probably hear a lot more questions, from the prospective employees about hybrid, about your technology stack, working from home, hybrid, right? Technology stack and all those other things. Questions that you naturally will not entertain, or you would not even speak about, a few months or years ago. Okay, how are we preparing our employees for the upcoming changes? Are they just going to affect us? What upskilling and skilling programs are in place? What's our L&D plan like? Is it still the same training plan year on year, from performance assessment, feedback from managers? What is it like? Okay, so very, very critical that we start to think about these things, right? Okay, just quickly checking in the chat box to see if there are any comments. Okay, so the other things that we need to check within our organization is, what's the current state of our IT infrastructure, right? Is it agile? Is it scalable? What do we have what can we discover as our own IT? Have the necessary data infrastructure to collect data, right? Does our IT team have the expertise to support our people through this period, even as the changes come? Are they able to adapt, deploy, maintain new systems, or they're just your regular office support, right? Now, and then of course, data. Do we have clean, reliable, and accessible data? Again, let's state this here. Every organization, whether it's clean and usable or not, is a different ballgame. Every organization has got data. And your ability to be able to tell stories or make decisions from your data is going to directly impact how you perform, make decisions, and how agile you are. For some companies, right, when they take some of their reports, old reports maybe, or reports for maybe like the last 2-3 years, and they just put it on within a safe process, right? Put it on an AI platform. They are surprised at the value of insight that they get just from the feedback, right? Just from assessing, analyzing that particular data using AI platforms. Okay, so very, very critical. Now, if we go back here and we say that we talked about culture, technology, and data, when you as a HR professional want to answer this question within your organization, you would realize that it's almost impossible for you to answer these questions without engaging with the leaders of these departments. That's what HR for now and the future is. And by the time you are done, you will find enough information and enough work for you and your team for a considerable future. Because the HR knowledge and competencies that you have that are the base and the reason why you are in that role in the first place, they're all critical. By no means, we're not going to sit here and say that, no, that is a required base. However, when you go beyond that and you begin to work as a true partner to the business, you are looking at all these different aspects, okay? And you're beginning to analyze with the business leaders, including your finance team, right? Where are we today? When you speak to your finance team, what's our cash flow looking like? Okay, have conversations around EBITDA with them, okay? From your own perspective, where do we sit within the next 6 months, 1 year, okay? Before you go and start proposing initiatives, that are people initiatives. I'm not saying people initiatives are bad. I mean, let me provide some context there. I'm saying that those people initiatives should be aligned with the business in a sense that it provides the business comfort that you have thought about them as you're thinking about the people, okay? So there's just got to be a balance, all right? Now, to take from the questions that we just asked and to drive real change within organizations, we then see that it's important to have a compelling vision. Okay? It's important to have active, visible executive leadership commitment. Now that's in two phases, right? So first off is that the leaders are committed to the process. The second is that the leaders are able to deliver on it. So when you ask yourself, like we said earlier, about leadership development, you need to critically analyze that within your own business. You know, when HR members meet at Hangouts and they're having conversations about leaders in the organizations, if you are privy to hear some of the things that they say, you will laugh your head off. You know, if you're privy to hear their opinions of some of the leaders, you will just be surprised. And hopefully that the perception is not both ways, that the leaders also think that the HR people don't know what they're doing, right? So, and all of that stems from the fact that you're looking at a leader and you're asking yourself from a strategic and an operational point of view, is this person able to provide on a consistent basis the level of support that we need to deliver now and continuously, okay? So, very, very important. Again, to drive cross-functional collaboration, right? Because as we move, when you look at larger organizations now, you start to find that, as been discussed over the years, classic departments, so your HRDs, that and that, they've just been broken down gradually into projects, into project teams, squad teams, people that are just coming together to deliver things, or are leveraging platforms to get people to work together to deliver on stuff. Okay, and that's very, very important, because that way you have that shared commitment, to deliver on something. You have the shared, desire to go through the long haul. People are able to adapt, they're able to innovate without the usual bureaucratic walls that just, hang around them, right? Leverage technology and data. Now, I said earlier, and I'll say it again, digital transformation isn't optional anymore. And that is so critical, because for you as HR, when you think about it, or even as anything, how are you enabling your people to leverage technology? Because whether or not you're doing it, people are already doing it within your teams. So you probably may have received an email and you're sure that this email, this person must have consulted or DeepSeek or something, right? Now, when you do the encouraging in a way that is safe, you're also, not giving yourself the opportunity to take advantage of the innovative ideas that can come from best output from the work that they do, and all the other different factors as well. Again, pay attention to your data, okay? Very, very important. Now, effective and consistent communication. So every Monday when I get to work, right, before I settle down at all, I just go to any of the floors where I have a group of employees, and you can ask questions, just ask any question. The work that you're doing, whatever project we are working on at the same time, at the time, initiatives happening, because I have a number of teams that report to me, or people that I work with, it will be difficult for everybody to say, that I'm going to come and sit with each team. So I just leverage such opportunities, sit with different teams, and you can ask questions, and so you can provide information. You'll be surprised at what people want to know. So consistent communication. There were things that we used to know a lot as, what put them as town hall meetings within businesses that, businesses you will have to provide employee updates. Those have to be more consistent now, in various forms. They don't have to be like actual town hall meetings. They could be communication, email, communication via whatever platform you use that is engaging, maybe Slack, if you roll off from Slack to other platforms, something that just provides employees updates on where your organization is at, how you are moving towards your goal, what's changing soon, how you're going to be able to support them through the change process, and all of the different factors, yeah? And then, of course, cultural alignment and psychological safety, because things are changing so fast, it's a difficult period for people, because things are changing at the offices or in your organizations, but they're also changing at home, or they're changing in people's personal lives, right? And so, they have to adapt to all these things and juggle all of them, right? Excuse me, they want to be able to work within organizations and be able to tell that, look, if I come up to you and I say I have this idea, I'm not going to be shut down, or at least you will take a look at it, pretty much. Okay, so creating that environment for psychological safety, for the organization is very, very, for the employees within the organization is very, very critical. Okay, and then of course. Sorry, 1 second. Of course, we can take that. Excuse me, Yetunde, how long do I have left? Just so that I'm conscious of the time.
So you're still within, I think you can still, yes, you can still proceed.
Okay, all right. Okay, so, and then of course, when we come into where we play as core HR professionals, you now start to think about recruiting for now and the future. Now, we talked about competencies before. We've got to begin to take the pain to really define the competencies required to deliver on business strategy. So sometimes I tell people that we overthink things, right? I overthink things sometimes as well. Just take your business strategy in whatever form that it is and start to break it down on pen and paper. If you want to leverage AI, you can. And ask, what are the competencies you think are required within XYZ departments to deliver on XYZ this to, over a period of, and just ask. Because again, if we don't evaluate our existing competencies, and we also don't think these competencies that drive innovation and agility and embed all of that together when we're recruiting, you don't want to be recruiting people for the past. Now, there was a conversation recently about, with HR, not recently, it's an ongoing conversation, would AI take people's jobs, or will technology take people's jobs? And the answer to that always is that it will enrich, people's jobs as well. And then more importantly, it would increase output. But if you focus on where it takes people's jobs, it's oftentimes because those are people that will not adapt. So how do we then help our own organization to not have to go through that journey, to sort of manage what would be the input into our organization, okay, from a talent perspective. So we need to take a good look at those competencies that we require to deliver on our business strategy. Make sure we have that through the talent acquisition process, from interviewing, from sourcing, it needs to be top of mind, and then we drive that on it. We have to be very conscious, okay? And of course, source diverse talent pools, right? Now, we need to cultivate a growth mindset, okay? So again, very critical, because learning is a journey. And in this case, it's going to have to be continuous. So we have to encourage micro-learning. We've got to encourage experimentation. We've got to encourage learning, from setbacks, from failures. Now, that has to be managed. And the best way to manage that oftentimes is also through effective, coaching from line managers. When people find that if I'm able to contribute within an organization and I try something and it doesn't work, and I don't get beat down, they'll try again. All right. So even being agile comes from, you become agile when you have tried something, it's not working, you move on to the next thing, right? That's what really agility is. You move on to the next thing, or you notice there's something that you need to adapt to that may take you to the next level, and then you adapt. Okay. So it's very, very important that we encourage experimentation, encourage learning. All right. And then, of course, encourage design thinking within our people, right? There are ways that we always get results over the years within our organization. Those ways have to change. We've got to be open to that, okay? And then, of course, aligning performance, with what we want to, what we align our performance planning and measurements to what we want to achieve, okay? So think of it this way. Performance management process is also another part of HR that we just seem to just do year in, year out, right? Oh, let's just set the plans. Oh, let's just measure. Oh, let's just have feedback sessions. Oh, let's just, and sometimes it's when you get to that stage that you want to just start to address it or you want to take care of it. And look, it's got to be very conscious. If there isn't clarity from the business strategy to departmental level to individual goals and objectives, we're joking, okay? So it's very important that as businesses and as HR professionals, we reevaluate how we're measuring performance. And it doesn't have to be that old way of, start at the beginning of the year and end at, whatever your financial year is, because it doesn't necessarily have to be like a January to December thing. It's important that we look at our performance management process and be creative through it. For some organizations, the year-long process would not work. For others, OKRs will work. What works for your organization? How are you able to adapt and to be able to manage? Okay. And then, of course, you have to align your goals with output, measuring the behavioral outcomes you want to see. Okay. Because that's going to be really big, right? And then, of course, continuous feedback, like we always said, recognizing people who have done well, and of course, driving collaboration, people who have also taken risks as well. Very, very important that we encourage them, because most times you would find that after someone has taken a risk, well-guided risk, by the way, I should say, you may find something at the end of that tunnel that works with or works for the benefit of your organization. So very, very critical that we encourage that process of performance management, especially through the line managers. Now, a lot of what we need to do to be able to deliver on leading the organization through organizational changes would mean that as HR, we understand where our boundaries are. So if you go through the boundaries if you go through the end-to-end process of recruitment and what you call it now, from talent acquisition to exit, and you go through all of that rigorously all the time, including all the operational parts, and you don't leverage the line managers as they should, as the first line coaching line for employees, you don't grow the leaders within the business, right, to be able to adapt, align with the people's strategy in a way that they're also able to guide and do their primary responsibility, you'll be burnt out. And so you will find yourself in a place where at the end of the day, sorry, 1 second. At the end of the day, you're too focused on administrative duties through your day-to-day activities, and you can't see what the business wants to see. Okay. No matter how well you do those ones, they're always asking continuously, how is this person helping us to achieve our strategy? Oh, how are we bringing the right talent? Oh, how are we measuring the performance? How are we adapting to the next thing? Okay. And so for HR, that is very, very critical to know. Now, our toolkit, to deliver today and in the future, right, starts first of all with our HR competencies. I said earlier that let's not think that driving organizational changes is going to now relieve us of our primary duties as HR professionals. As HR professionals, it's still very, very important that we are deeply rooted in understanding people strategy. We understand HR operations. We are able to be advocates for people, right? And we understand talent management, across all the different models that we may choose to apply within our organizations that best works for us. However, it doesn't end there, okay? So strategic thinking and business acumen is critical, okay? How are we able to co-create a strategy for the business? How are we able to drive commercial? How do we understand commercial fluency? So one of the things I say to people is, you can either hack this by going to INSEAD and go and do a course on business performance and business and financial performance for organization, or you can just go to LinkedIn and go to the LinkedIn Learning and take a stack of courses, right? Or you can also go to YouTube and watch a couple of YouTube playlists, right? That would help you. How you get it, remember the image of the meal at the beginning, how you get the knowledge and you're able to practice and you're able to, grow your business acumen, doesn't matter, just get it. Because it's important that we drive those conversations, and the way to drive them is to first have the knowledge, okay? We need to know the customers that our businesses are serving, right? From your internal customers to your external customers, who are they? What factors affect them? So if I'm a restaurant, for example, like we gave at the beginning, and Glovo comes into the market, right? I need to understand how will my own customers react to Glovo, okay? And how can I adapt? Should I just quickly get onto Glovo? You know, we've got to know things like that. Understanding change management, aligning AI with business strategy, because, like we said earlier, AI will impact business strategy, okay? Very, very critical for us to know. Now, it's important for us to have technical and data-centric competencies, because I've seen examples, for example, over the last 2 weeks where you're even seeing roles of HR and IT being merged, right? Because technology drives a lot of what we do now, and the rate of digital transformation is so fast, you cannot but have technical and data-centric competencies at this point. It's very, very critical, because you would need that to be able to function effectively. One, to not function just as a HR professional, but to be able to guide the leaders within your own organization. Okay, what do you do around your technology infrastructure? Not because you want to have deepened knowledge over it. No. And sometimes people mix that up. You don't need to be a software developer or a CTO to be able to tell that maybe you need to migrate from Gmail to Zoho or something. No. You just need to check, okay, how is this working for our organization? What's the cost level? What's the cost, the benefit analysis? You need to just be able to speak that lingua franca. One. Two, understand how it works. You need to have AI proficiency. Let's not kid ourselves, right? Because that also helps you. Prompting, like I said here, we had talked about it earlier. Think of prompting as communication, communicating effectively, being able to ask a platform, I'd like to do XYZ. Could you share with me 3 ideas to be able to implement this? And then you continue to, enrich your prompts or your queries to the platform. And all of that stems from being able to communicate. Don't forget that you're not doing all of this just so that you can provide value for your own organization, but also to add value to yourself. Because a lot of the things that we do today, say for example, the competencies, deploying competencies has always been a lot of work for HR professionals. If, for example, you think of deploying an HRIS, and at the base of it, you also need to include the competencies for all the job functions within your organization. Once you get to that point, it becomes like a hard, a hill to climb for most organizations, because that's not specifically done out. Some countries went ahead to build competency frameworks for their people that you can leverage on. But now you could leverage AI to do that, depending on your skill level, okay? So again, you then have the human-centric and soft skills, right? So emotional intelligence, communication skills, adaptability and flexibility, human-centric design thinking. Because when it gets to a certain level of technology penetration, some of the things that we do now, we will be able to automate. And when we automate them, we are left with the points where we're able to connect with our people. Now, the goal is not to try and do that on an individual basis. It's to try and design things that affects our organization as a whole, okay? So it's not for the counselorship profession that HR has. That's not where we're going to with this, because you just have that continuous flow into your office of people coming to come and engage you to try, get your thoughts on matters and not. No. It's to think of this at the level where you are able to systemize it, okay? Right? So those are very, very critical things to understand, that for us as HR, when you start from your base, which is your HR competency, to grow your strategic and business acumen and layer onto that technical and human-centric skills, you're able to add value to your organization, okay? So I'll get to here where we say your action plan, make it in. Ask us, what's the one concrete action plan you can take in your own HR within the next 30 days to foster innovation and agility in your organization? Now, I'm asking that as the beginning of the Q&A you get. So you can sort of go through the chat box and see if people have questions, we'll take them. Some of those questions I would answer personally, some I would leave open so that we can all share our thoughts and we'll get contributions from everyone. because we believe that sometimes questions would also bring up areas within the session that we haven't talked about. Okay. But I would like to also still ask this, that what's the one concrete action plan you can take in your home HR role within the next 30 days to foster innovation and agility within your organization? Okay, so I'd like to ask us, from everyone on the call, what do we think? And then what are the questions that we have based on the session that we've had so far? Hi, everyone. Are we still here? Okay, Martin, I saw your message. I would share my contact on the chat box. Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts about the session? What questions do we have? Please raise your hands if you want to speak so that you can be unmuted. What contributions do we have as well? Okay, so Mr. Yemi, are you on the call so that I can hand over to you in the meantime whilst we take questions?
Thank you so much, sir.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you so much. Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for that beautiful presentation session. Very enlightening. I will say this is a real masterclass in the very essence of the word or phrase. And it's a session I think I'll watch 3-4 times over and over again so that I can fully distill and get the full meat out of this beautiful session. In case you have a question, contribution, comment, please raise your hands quickly and we'll enable you on mute so that you can share your thoughts or comments. Also, if you are the shy type and you quickly want to type your questions, observations, please do so. If we don't see any comments or hands, we'll then assume safely that we want to go and sleep over these deep insights we have learned tonight, and then hopefully see what we can deploy on the job on Monday morning. All right. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. This will be a convenient intersection to wrap up the call. I'll unmute everyone here now so that we can say thank you verbally to our facilitator for tonight, who has so graciously, magnanimously, generously shared copiously from his wealth of knowledge and experience. So please, let's thank him, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
so much. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
This is superb.
All right,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eme, for the opportunity as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I did enjoy it.
You're welcome.